How many of you know someone who got an A- and then cried? Because it wasn't an A+, okay? Some of you know maybe you are that person, okay? We're going to be talking about perfectionism, and Salvador Dali said, have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it. And that is so true, right? So how many of you know a perfectionist or someone who has OCD? Okay, all right. All the people who actually are perfectionists, you raise your hand like this really well. The other people are like, yeah, I know someone, right? All right, so I'm glad if you're here today because you have OCD, you're here and you happen to have OCD, and you are here and you struggle with perfection, then I'm glad you're here, okay? Because there's some verses that have helped me, and I believe they'll help you. Now, being a perfectionist, there are some benefits, there are some good things, like if you're trying to stack wood in a truck, you can get a lot of wood on there, okay, if you're a perfectionist. And also, hopefully none of you will have to have brain surgery, but if you do, you're going to want the perfectionist. I want that guy working on my brain, all right? You don't want the guy who later they look at your x-rays and they're like, you know what, you're going to have to come back in. The surgeon accidentally dropped some Cheetos. Right? You don't want that guy. You don't want that brain surgeon. All right. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 4 says this: if you wait for perfect conditions, you will never get anything done. And that's one of the problems with perfectionism, is that you tend to procrastinate because you're always waiting for the perfect conditions to write that book, to do that task, to achieve that goal, and you never get it done because the perfect conditions never come. So here's the disadvantages. Not an exhaustive list, but here's just a few. Writer's block. When you're a perfectionist, you want to do the best you can, and so all of a sudden when you're so focused on the outcome being perfect, it just stops you from being creative. Another one is people don't like to work with you if you're a perfectionist. And if you hold your hypercritical judgments and your hypercritical standards on others, you enforce it, people will eventually say, I don't really want to work with that person because they are extremely hard to please, and they're hypercritical. So that's one of the problems. It's hard to have friends. And then you don't enjoy life. You don't enjoy what you do when you're hypercritical, when you're a perfectionist. It becomes something where you dread. And I can relate to that because I'm an artist. I like to draw. Although that's what I've said all my life. I like to draw. But the truth is, growing up, I actually didn't like it. I was talented at it, but I wasn't enjoying it. Because as soon as the project was done, I would look at it and I would say, I could do that better. Then I wanted to throw it away or not look at it because I was like, that's not my best. And so I would do this over and over, and in high school, I had the same problems. I would create something, I'm like, oh, I think that's my best. Then I'd look a little closer, and no, I got to start all over. I got to start over. And it wasn't until I was in college taking a figure drawing class, because you have to do that to get your fine arts degree. And so I did a lot of praying, because figure drawing, you're going to be drawing figures. And I found out behind the scenes that they choose models who aren't the greatest looking, so that no one signs up just for that class for that. So, so I'm taking the figure drawing class, and my art teacher comes up to me, and I am like this on the paper. I'm like, it has to be perfect, you know. And he says, "Whoa, buddy, you need to relax. Give me the pencil." So I give him the pencil, and he puts it in my wrong hand. Now I'm left-handed, so he puts it in my right hand, but it's the wrong hand. And it feels wrong. And he says, you're going to be drawing from now on with your right hand until I tell you otherwise. And I had seen him draw, and he's a good artist, so I had respect for him. So even though it felt really, really wrong, I listened to him and I did what he said. And I started to draw, and there was no way I was going to get things perfect because it's my wrong hand. And during that week, all week I had to draw with my wrong hand. During that week, I produced lousy work, but it actually was healing me and helping me. The next week he said, okay, you can put the pencil back in your left hand. And I did. And all of a sudden, I started to enjoy the process because I was like, oh my goodness, I've taken this for granted all my life, how it feels for the process. And it took my drawing level, my drawings to the next level. I mean, I could draw naked people like crazy, okay? And my artwork really did. It excelled because he opened up a part of my mind that was so closed. It had to be perfect. I was so focused on that, I wasn't able to see what I was looking at because I was too focused on the outcome. And by forcing me to go against how I usually thought, I was actually able to be in the moment and actually produce better quality work. To this day, this painting I did after college has been in my office. Now that would not have happened in high school because I would have looked at it and said, oh, I could do that better, and I would toss it, okay? But I have this in my office, and I enjoy looking at it. And it's not because it's perfect. I could do this better. But I've actually grown and matured, and I like the process. I liked painting this, and I like just looking at it. Even though I could do it better, I have actually changed inside me, and I can enjoy my work. All right? Oh, there it is right there. Okay. So, I was playing chess with my oldest boy, Joshua. He's 6 years old. And as we were playing, he was winning. He had my rook, my knight, my bishop, and a pawn. Now, I had 4 of his pawns, and that's it. And as we're playing, he all of a sudden stops and he says, let's start over. I said, why? You're winning. He's like, no, you have 4 of my pawns. I was like, yeah, but you have my rook, my knight, my bishop. Like, you're winning. And he's like, no, the pawns are special because at the end of the game, if you put the pawn at the end, you get your queen back. I was like, okay, clever, that's good. But you're still winning. I'm like, come on, you can still win. He could have taken my queen the next move. I'm like, look, I pointed out, you can have my queen. Look, just move. It's your move. He's like, no, I want to start over. And he would not move. And we did not finish that game because he wanted to start over. It wasn't going the way he had in mind, right? And so he just wanted to start over. He discovered a problem, wanted to start over. Now, discovering a problem doesn't mean that we always have to start over. Imagine your job is to climb this mountain. And imagine your problem is you don't want to touch any dirt, you don't want to sweat, and you don't want to touch any rocks. So every time you touch dirt or rocks or you get sweaty, you have to start at the base of the mountain. Are you ever going to reach the top that way? No, because sometimes to reach the top, you have to overcome. Don't start over, overcome. Sometimes you have to push through. Sometimes you have to sweat and get dirty and get messy and realize, oh, wow, I'm a mess. Oh, wow, I'm not perfect. That's okay. Push through. You don't always have to start over. And so here's some causes for perfectionism. Maybe you had hypercritical parents. My mom's here today. She's an awesome mom. I am so blessed. All right. But maybe you had hypercritical parents, and so you are now a perfectionist because you were always trying to please your parents who were hypercritical. Maybe it's because you experienced a painful event. Maybe you were embarrassed because you weren't good at something, and you said, never again. I'm going to go home, I'm going to practice that skill, and next time, I'm never going to be embarrassed like that again. And so maybe in that area of your life, you're a perfectionist because you don't want to be hurt again. Or maybe it's because you have an unrealistic picture of God. And I think a lot of us Christians who are perfectionists struggle with this one, where we think, God, all he cares about is me being perfect. So I better be perfect in everything. And when we have that view of God, that all he's after and concerned about is us being perfect, it's going to affect how we live and how we do this life. And so there are some verses I'm going to share with you this morning that have helped me to see Jesus the way I think I'm supposed to see Jesus. And it has helped me. Because I'll tell you, I struggled with perfectionism. I think I still do in some areas of my life. But I have come a long way. And a lot of it has to do with these verses I'm going to share with you. So here's the first one. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 19, when I first met Joshua, who's our youth minister now, he was talking to someone else and talking about this verse. And as he was sharing his insight on this verse, I was just blown away because I had read this verse many times, but I hadn't realized the grace that is in this verse. Jesus says, therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And when Joshua was talking to this other person, he said, I find it fascinating that the people who are teachers, who are inaccurate, they're not perfect, they're still in the kingdom of God. And those who teach accurately are in the same kingdom that the inaccurate teachers are teaching. And he just was saying that really casual with this other person, and I was like, thank you, Jesus. Because up to that point, I was under the impression God was like, you have to get it all right perfectly. If you want even a chance of getting to heaven, you better have all your theology perfect. And so it stressed me out. I was always terrified too. I'm like, I really hope I interpreted that verse correctly. Really hope I got that perfect. And it was a stressful way to live. And when I saw that in the scriptures, Jesus saying, hey, I value accuracy, but I love inaccurate people even more. It's like Jesus was saying, I want you to be as accurate as you can be, but don't sweat it. You're still in my kingdom. And that really helped me. That helped me. That was like healing in my heart to realize he had my back. He knew I would try my hardest to be accurate, but there was going to be times I mess up, and he has my back. That is such a relief. So here's kind of an illustration of that. Accurate theology is valuable, but to God, inaccurate people are even more valuable. And we see this on the cross. God, he loves holiness. He loves us getting his laws right, but when we break his laws, he, instead of coming down here and saying, let me just show all these laws you broke, and that's the reason why you're leaving, and I'm never going to see you again. But instead, on the cross, he says, yeah, here's all the laws you broke. Let me pay for them. Because although I have high standards and perfection is what I am, I love imperfect people even more than the laws they break. Now, when you have that God you worship, it will change the way you do life. When you realize how much God loves you more than he loves his law, it will change the way you treat people who break his law and break your laws. Because if you have a God you worship that you can break his laws and he says, I love you more than those laws, that grace is going to trickle down to other people. And it's going to be a blessing in your life. Basing salvation on having perfect theology is like shooting ourselves in the foot. Okay, it produces hypercritical Christians. It produces a lot of church splits. A lot of church splits. People saying, oh, you know what? We should split because you think the verse should be interpreted this way. Well, I think it should be interpreted this way. Let's split. I think my interpretation is more like the first century church, and yours isn't, so let's split. And so having the ultimate goal is having perfect theology can become an idol that causes a lot of splits. And then it is also causes people to live in fear. You're always, if that's how you get to heaven, is having perfect theology, you're always going to be in fear mode of, well, did I get it right? Did I get it right? And I am so happy to tell you it's not about getting perfect theology right to get to heaven. It's about knowing Jesus and his perfect blood shed for you. In Proverbs chapter 17, verse 9, it says, love forgets mistakes. Nagging about them parts the best of friends. A perfectionist who's always pointing out, oh, you could have done better, you could have done better. They're going to have a hard time having friends. But someone who truly loves someone is able to say, you know what, you're more valuable. And I'm going to love you. I'm not going to bring up your past over and over and over. Now, here's the second text that really helped me, and it's the main text today. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 8. Paul says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, and the it is a painful thorn in the flesh. What is that? The Bible does not tell us exactly what it is. It could have been an actual physical eye problem that Paul had. It could have been a person in his life he wished was out. It was something that he saw made him weak. It's something that made him say, you know what? Jesus, if you just take that away, I'd like to start over. If you would just take that away, I think I would become more like you, Jesus. So please, I want to be like you, Jesus. Take away that problem. But this is what Jesus does. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. We're talking about people who are perfectionists. Jesus says, actually, when you're weak, that's perfect. When you're weak, you're going to lean on me and stop leaning on yourself. When you're weak, you're going to rest in my power. When you're weak, I can actually get some work done in you and through you. And so Jesus is telling Paul's saying, just take this problem, this painful problem, that I would be more like you, Jesus, if you just took this out of my life. Jesus says, actually, Paul, I gave you that problem because that problem is making you more like me. If I took that problem away, you would actually become arrogant and start boasting and not being like me. It's that thorn in the flesh that's actually making you like me. So you have to change your perspective. And that's exactly what happens. Paul says, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults and hardships, in persecutions and difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong. What in the world has happened from Paul saying, take it away from me, to, actually, I'd like to keep it. In fact, actually, I'll gladly keep it. In fact, I'll boast about this because it's making me like you, Jesus. There's been a huge perspective change. Jesus doesn't always want to take away the problems in our lives. A lot of times, he wants to give us a new perspective. That's how he fixes a lot of things in our lives. We're like, we would be more like you, Jesus, if you just took this weakness out of our lives. And Jesus says, actually, let me change your perspective. Yeah, so this gentleman at this church in Sacramento said, I highlighted all the commands when I became a Christian. And I thought, that is such a great idea. I'm going to buy a Bible, this one, and I'm going to highlight all the commands of God, but I'm going to go a step further and highlight all the reasons for the commands, all the whys. So I did. I got this Bible, started highlighting, and I got about 50 to 60% done when my Bible was open to page 481, and my wife was trying to get the ketchup out, and it went all over my Bible. And I remember thinking, I have to start over. I have to start over because I had already, up to this point, bought 15 other Bibles that I had highlighted, but then I decided I don't like my highlighting system, so I got to start over. So I know where my son Joshua gets his perfection tendencies, okay? So this was like my 16th Bible that I was figured out the best way to highlight, and I had gotten 50 to 60% done, and ketchup is now all over my Bible. Melissa quickly got it off the best she could, but to this day you can still see the ketchup stains. And I was thinking, man, I had gotten so far, but I got to start over. This is now worth nothing to me. And I closed it, and then I thought about it. And as I thought about it for a while, this is days later, I realized, you know what? This represents me. I am not perfect. And yet, God doesn't throw me out. And I'll always remember when I get to that page that my wife spilled ketchup on it. The one I married, the one I love, spilled ketchup on this. And so it went from, I got to toss this, to now I cherish it. I will not give this Bible away because a perspective has changed. Jesus gave me a different perspective. When I said, just take it away, this is now a thorn in my flesh, Jesus said, no, let me change your perspective. You're going to cherish this. And that's a lot of the way Jesus works with us, is he gives us a new perspective on things. All right, so I like this picture because it's perfect timing. The peanut right in the air, the squirrel about to lunge after it. And within just this last month, I was talking to Ben and Christina, or talking with Ben, and Ben was saying that there was a time in their lives when they were hit by just all sorts of trials. And during this time, Christina had to get her gallbladder removed. Am I correct? Was it gallbladder? Okay. And so during this time, she gets her gallbladder removed, and Ben was saying, but you know what? It was perfect timing. It was in between her semesters. And so here he is talking to me and praising God for his timing. See, a perspective had to change in order for him to have that joy and that praise about God's timing. And then just a few weeks ago, Thomas, some of you know Thomas and Christy, who started coming here just in the last month. He had to get his appendix removed. And I saw them last Sunday night, and he says, you know what? It was perfect timing. I'm not teaching. School's out. It's the summertime. So if it had to happen, this was the perfect time for it to happen. Here he is thanking God for his timing. That's a perspective change. The only way we can praise God for our thorns in the flesh is when we have a new perspective, which Jesus can give us. Here's a new perspective. I fell down the stairs today and thought, wow, that's the fastest I moved in years. Where's Nedra? Nedra, where are you? Oh, yeah, Nedra sent me that. Thank you, Nedra. Okay. So it's not always start over, but overcome with a new perspective, thanks to Jesus. So as we close out, I want you to think about this. What's something you've been trying to start over? Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it's some kind of task. What is it you're trying to start over that maybe Jesus actually wants you to overcome? Don't go back to the beginning and start over. Know you're imperfect, but push through. Just keep going. Because maybe you don't need to buy a new Bible. Maybe you don't need to start over on the chess game. Maybe you don't need to go back to the base of the mountain and start over. Maybe you don't need the painful thorn in the flesh you've been asking God to take away over and over. Maybe you don't need it to be taken away. Maybe you just need a new perspective. Maybe you need just a new perspective from Christ. And so I want us to think about this. If Jesus wouldn't throw out his disciples and start all over after finding imperfections with them, what makes you think that he'll throw you out when he finds imperfections in you? He's not going to throw you out. He already knew you were going to have imperfections. Just get back up. And I love the people that Jesus chose to be disciples. They were not perfect. And if any of them were perfectionists, probably Paul was it. And yet, if you find yourself a perfectionist with a lot of problems, Jesus can use people like Paul, people like you. Just get up and work with him. Trust him.